Welcome to the Islam Unraveled Anti-Racist Initiative podcast. Our guest today, Harman Singh Pandher. Thank you, Harman, and thank you for joining us. I know you're very busy, and I know last week you said you were invited by the Peel District, which is a large Peel District or a school district in Ontario. And so maybe just for introductions, you're an award-winning author and work in the community, youth work and anti-racist work. So let's start off with introducing yourself.
Yeah, thank you, Tariq. Pleasure to be here with you. Like you said, my given name is Harmohanjit Singh Pandher, and but I go by Harman. And I'm sitting here in my classroom in the Surrey School District at Beaver Creek Elementary School. I've actually been teaching at this school in this classroom for the past 15 years. I have a grade 5 class, but I live in Burnaby and grew up in Burnaby, went to school there, and went on to UBC, where I got my degree in English literature, a Bachelor of Arts, and went on to do a teaching degree, a Bachelor of Education. And I was a student teacher in Burnaby, became a substitute teacher, a teacher on call in Burnaby and Surrey. Quickly found full-time work here in Surrey in a full-time position. A unique part of my job is that I also teach Punjabi. So I'm a homeroom teacher and I teach all subjects, math, language arts, social studies, but also Punjabi. That's a language option for students at Beaver Creek Elementary. And there's about a half dozen other elementary schools in Surrey where Punjabi is offered as a language option along with French. And of course, kids can then take Punjabi as they go into high school. So that's a unique part of my job. I enjoy teaching all subjects and enjoy doing sports. Kind of dressed for some sports today. We were out running. We do a running club outside. Unfortunately, can't coach this year. We don't have teams going this year like we've had in the past because of the pandemic. There's no organized school versus school sports. But that's a big part of my life. Sports, basketball, soccer, volleyball, badminton, you name it. I coach it all and I play it all. And writing is a big passion for me. You mentioned I'm an author, and I know we're going to talk about my book some more today, and I've got it here with me. Gurpreet Goes to Gurdwara, Understanding the Sikh Place of Worship. So writing has been a passion of mine for years. It began with poetry. Poetry was my first love. Writing in high school, and when I was at UBC, I actually published my first book, and it was a book of poetry. And so that was about 20 years ago, with my first book, and it was about my identity as a Sikh Canadian, our community's history, our beliefs and values, and the whole, I guess, evolution of our community from India to Canada, and celebrating that, really. So that book was called Sugar, Steel, and the Maple Leaf, the poems of a young Sikh Canadian. And like I said, 20 years ago, I was a young Sikh Canadian. Now I'm the next generation now, and I'm working with those youth in our community now to for them to take the torch and continue doing the good work in the community. So more now I'm working more on that mentorship side and in a lot of the community service I do. But like I said, writing was a passion, and it led to this picture book, which has opened a lot of doors for me to get that message of understanding and acceptance, inclusion, diversity, to a larger audience. So it's been a great tool that way for work that I was doing anyway for years around anti-racism and multiculturalism. but I could use my talent of writing to get it to a larger audience and to reach kids. This is a picture book that I've published now, and so it's allowed me to connect with kids, in classrooms across the province. And you mentioned the Peel School District, so the second largest school district in Ontario, and as for April, we just finished Sikh Heritage Month. That was proclaimed a few years back by the government of Canada, that April was Sikh Heritage Month, and the government of Canada was the first to recognize Sikh Heritage Month anywhere in the world. And so I was asked, along with some other authors, to do a presentation for the Peel School District in Brampton, Mississauga, and there was over 800 schools, over 800 classes online when I did a live read aloud and a book talk and a question and answer. So that was the biggest one I've done so far, because if there's 800 classes, it'd probably be about at least 16,000 students out there watching, so it was that was great to be able to reach an audience like that. And so we finished April, and now I'm here and talking to you. So it's great, and I'm sure, and you mentioned award-winning, and we'll talk more about this. It's hard to see maybe on the screen right now, but it's the Anti-Racism Award that I was honored to receive from the provincial government for work that I've done in the community, and the work that this book has allowed me to do, and it being used as an anti-racist tool in classrooms and by parents. So the award was given for intercultural trust. That's the category that I got it for building intercultural trust between communities, to helping to reduce hatred in our community, really racism, hatred, and to combat that in some way. So yeah, I'm honored to have received that, and it's a big responsibility. And I know you're doing great work in that field too. So it's humbling knowing how much is being done out there. And I was, singled out. There was 5 people to receive an award this year, but I've worked with so many amazing people who are kind of boots on the ground doing this work day in, day out. So I couldn't have done it without all the volunteers and activists that I've worked with along the way.
Well, I will say, obviously, passion and your intention from early on, like to really impact people in a meaningful way, interculturally, and choosing that arc of your life from English literature and then education, and then being able to reach out to the next generation and be an educator, and then communicating in languages not only through writing but all through sports, because you can relate with people in multiple ways. And some people you don't really have to talk much, but playing with them, playing sports with them is a form of communication and a form of teaching as well. And so I can see on multiple fronts your intentionality of your work throughout your life seems really passionate and compassionate towards intercultural work, but also the next generations, which are going to take up the baton after us.
Yeah, thank you, Tark. And I believe we all have an artist inside of us. We all have an athlete. We all, we have these sides to us, and I take just as much passion as when I'm involved in my art and writing as I do when I'm out on the basketball court. These are all. It's I think it makes us a well-rounded person, right? And I think we all need to nurture those parts of us, right? The spiritual side, our physical well-being, mental, cultural well-being, all of those are important. One of the initiatives I'm involved in is a community initiative called the Such Community Hub. Such stands for SACH. Such means truth in Punjabi and some in other South Asian languages, and it also stands for South Asian Community Hub. Right, it's an acronym there, and it's so what we've begun is a an organization that is really an umbrella organization. We're bringing together agencies that are doing good work in the community already. They're providing service, whether it's mental health, counseling, really helping the most vulnerable in our community, homelessness, poverty, food security, wide range of services, bringing them together so we can work in an integrated way and in a collaborative way to help more people, because there are barriers, and sometimes it could be racial barriers, it could be linguistic barriers that are preventing people from getting the services that they need, social services, healthcare services, mental health services, and so they're falling through the cracks. And so, and part of the reason is that maybe we don't have this integrated model in our community, where kind of a one-stop shop where people can turn to for help. And other communities have used this model and it's been successful, Indigenous community and also I think even the Muslim community on its, like what you're doing with the Muslim food bank, for example, there I know it is the food bank, but you are helping the community in other ways as well, and we'd love to work collaboratively with the food bank. So right now we are still working to bring more partners on board, and we're speaking with government. We're having meetings with the provincial government, with the city government, with the federal, and then of course reaching out to the community as well. So we're still in these initial stages of building support, raising awareness about what we're doing. We don't have a permanent physical location yet for South Asian Community Hub. That requires some funding, and so that's what we're working on now. But I will tell people that if you'd like to learn more about what we're doing, to check out our website at suchbc.ca. That's SACHBC.ca, and you can again learn more about what we're doing. And more importantly, if you or anyone in your life needs any sort of help, you can contact us through the website. There's an email address there, and we're there to support anyone in any kind of need.
And again, I think as you and I had spoken about, with our values being aligned, where really to meaningfully help people is to help them comprehensively, as you said, with mental health. And if there's a food issue, food security, if there's, just helping people in which way, resumes, employment, jobs. Because
a holistic approach is what we like to say.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And, I wanted to just touch on influences and even role models. And you talked about when you wrote your first book, I'm sure there are poets and writers that inspired you. Let's talk about your role models and your influences, living or dead.
Oh, wow. Well, I'm going to start with my parents. Just starts at home. And what they influenced me in is a number of things. So my parents were both teachers in India before they came here. They were teachers, high school teachers, and they weren't able to continue teaching when they came to Canada. It was all about when they came in the early 70s. it was about survival, right? And just making enough, getting a job right away, making enough to live, pay the rent, and get started in life here. And so they weren't able to continue their education, or and go into the teaching profession here. But education was always a priority for them, and they instilled that in myself and my sister. I have one older sister, and from day one, books were always, everywhere in our house. Our house was a library, like, of just all kinds of books, history books, novels, and they never, if we ever asked for a book, the answer would never be no. It was always a yes for a book. We'd have to negotiate a bit for toys and things like that, but for books, they never said no. And so that of course had an influence. Of course, now I went on to become a teacher, but it was along with the education. The education, they didn't just limit to like school education. It was like they found ways to teach the community, like outside of being in a school, right? They participated in community events, and they took it upon themselves to be representatives for the Sikh community, and to at least be that one voice at an event that would share about our culture and our traditions, right? Or come into, even in a school, they would come into my school and do a turban tying demonstration or a sari tying demonstration, and probably for the first time. I mean, this is, I remember in the early 80s in elementary school, and they, and that was an eye opener for people in Burnaby, my elementary school, and the teachers. But it really helped break barriers and build bridges in the community, and that got me on the path of being involved in the community. So of doing seva. Seva means service in the Sikh tradition, and so it was all about giving back to the community. My dad and mom, they were just as busy volunteering in the community as they were with their careers and their jobs. And I find my dad, who's now retired, is probably busier now in his retirement, and all the community service he does, and which is great to see. And he's inspired me, not just myself, but many other people to do that. And it's because that's what he was taught when he first arrived. It was Canada Day 1972, July 1st, 1972. He arrived in Victoria after a long, many connections along the way from India. And the first thing he said when he got here, one of his friends here, actually one of his closest friends, was the former city councillor. Back then they called them alderman, former alderman from Vancouver. He was the first and only, unfortunately, he's the only South Asian city councillor in Vancouver history. His name is Seti Pendekar.
Wow.
And this was in the 70s he was elected, and he was elected to 2 terms. And there hasn't been anyone that looked like me or you since elected to Vancouver City Hall, which is a shame. I mean, so it shows we've still got work to do. That's why, we're still breaking barriers, and we're not done yet, right? So, but he was the first back then, and he was a friend of his, and very educated. He was a like Dr. Seti Pendekar, he's PhD, and he told him, get out of your house, right, and get into the community. Like, that's the first thing he told him. Like, get involved in the community, get politically involved. And he joined. He's been NDP since day one, and regardless of what party you belong to or what, I think it's important to be involved in the civic affairs of our community, and know what's going on. You don't have to run in an election, although he did. My dad did run in an election. He ran for school board in the mid 90s, and he fell short by a couple hundred votes. He ran for school board, and in the same election, Sav Dhaliwal, who's a longtime city councillor in Burnaby, he ran for his first time for city council. Both of them fell short by a few hundred votes. And the rest of their slate, the Burnaby Citizens Association is the name of our local party, the rest of the slates won. So the rest of the mayor and city council won their slate, and the rest of the school board slate won. But the two South Asian candidates didn't win. So Sav, good for him. He kept going, and he won the next time. And it might have even taken one more time after that, but he won, and now I think he's had about 4 terms, 4 or 5. And but my dad never ran again, so he only ran that one time, and then he didn't run.
And you ran, and you became.
Yeah, so that's where it comes full circle. So in 2011. He encouraged me to run. I was already a teacher. I was, of course, involved in education. I knew all the issues, and I had always been politically active and volunteering in the community. And so there was an opening for the school board. My dad and others encouraged me to run, and so I got elected in 2011. I served 2 terms up to 2018. I became the vice chair of the school board. So it was a great experience for those 7 years. Now I'm back to civilian life, and and we'll see what the next chapter holds. I'm not closing the doors on making another run politically in some way if the opportunity presents itself, definitely.
And you had the opportunity, because I did spend 1 year in Inman Elementary School, which is in Burnaby, and we lived on Bond Street nearby Central Park. So kind of a childhood a neighborhood of mine. So very diverse now, but it was very racist back then. We used to have neighbors that were, let's just say, didn't like brown people and would break our windows, and it was just altercations and what have you. So I'm sure you remember those times. And so now, we're at 2021, and the arc of 1972, the 1980s, 1990s, 2000s. So a lot has changed. A lot of good things have happened, but there are still other challenges that are still there. Now, in terms of anti-racism and that work, and let's talk about that and how you got into anti-racism as a work.
Yeah, well, I think first off, when I became active in the community and working on different causes, one is anti-racism was always one of the, I think, priorities for myself, the work that my family had done, but it was always about bringing people together, and educating others, right? Like taking that approach, right? That a lot of the hatred is like built on fear, right? Fear of the unknown, and then and that leads to mistrust, and so just helping to get rid of that ignorance, but often it's because people just haven't been exposed to to people from different cultures. And of course now we live in such a, like, probably the most diverse part of the world here, right? There's really no excuse, but like you said, times were different back then. And so I don't think we had the word for it back then, but now we do. And the word, it's another R word, and it's representation. And I think when we talk about representation, we're talking about representation in literature, that we see our stories reflected in books, in textbooks, picture books, novels. Like kids kids see themselves and are, and their experiences are validated, and they can relate. And then they get a sense of pride and sense of belonging, and not just newcomers to Canada, but kids like, I was born here, and I'm. This is a very Canadian story. This is my story, and this is a very Canadian story, right? And because Canada is made of people from all over the world, right? And so it's that's where I think the thinking has shifted, that we're demanding that we be represented in life as well, of course, in leadership roles, and be given and not in token positions, and not a symbolic representation, but actually at the table making decisions. I see it in the education system here. So it's great. I teach in a school with probably 90% South Asian population here. And it's important for someone like me to be in the school, and other teachers that have walked in the shoes of these families in our community, right? And same with having principals and at the district level and the school board level. So that's all important. So I've always been, a believer, like, put myself out there to be a role model for youth, especially because, you're sure to inspire someone. And, when I was elected to school board, I know that I was the first turbaned politician really elected at any level. I know, and school board often doesn't get a lot of attention, but even I didn't know that when it happened, that there hadn't been anyone else. And now I'm glad to see we have MPs from BC. We have and some of my friends, Randeep Sarai is an MP, and our Minister of Defense, Harjit Sajjan, another friend I grew up with, and the federal leader of the NDP, Jagmeet Singh, who's now makes his home in Burnaby South. So and from all communities, I think they're and I don't want to just look inward. Like, representation is important for all communities, and the struggle and the battle against racism is a team effort, right? It's a joint effort. It's not okay, well, we're doing fine, and our community isn't being targeted, so we're gonna move on to some other issue. No, look at what's happening with anti-Asian hate. It's on the rise right now, right? And anti-Black racism, and that's come to the fore over the last year. And so a lot has come under the microscope and during this pandemic, and so we have to stand together, right? And that your struggle is my struggle, and an injustice anywhere is an injustice everywhere, right? And our freedoms are interconnected, our rights are interconnected, and if we let our neighbors' rights be infringed upon and trampled on and taken away, well, we could be next, right? So that sense of solidarity, and I see when it was the Black Lives Matter, the marches were going on, and I was seeing Gurdwara is there. I was seeing not just youth from our community, but our institutions were taking part in those marches, and they're raising their voice when we're seeing Asian hate on the rise in the greater Vancouver area, like around North America, but you even see what's happening in Vancouver and Burnaby and Surrey, and the police departments are reporting 300, 500, 700% rise, some cases in hate crimes. So we can't be silent about that, right? That's almost worse, right? Like when you're there's a saying silence is violence.
Yeah.
Silence is violence. When I talk about these issues with my students, I talk about I relate it to bullying and being a bystander. And when you see, bullying, you want to be a friend. You want to be someone who stands up to it. And just because you're not being picked on, if you're a bystander and don't say anything, well, that makes you just as bad. And so I talk about it in those terms to like grade 5 students, and then they get it. When we're talking to older youth, we start using terms like allyship and being an ally and an advocate, and eventually, anti-racist, right? And that requires you to take action. And it's not good enough to be non-racist. You can't just, I'm not racist. Well, but if you just stop it right there and say, because, well, I'm not racist, I don't need to worry about anything. Well, then you're condoning the racism that we see is out there in our community, right? So we want to be part of the solution and not just accept the status quo, because it won't just go away on its own, right? It's always taken courage and people speaking out, however you do it, maybe using social media platforms, right? Creating your own podcast, writing a book, participating in a march, but or how we vote, right? That's important too. So, but it's important to be involved. So that was a long answer to my influences and how we got to here.
It's powerful, and again, with your parents being such tireless advocates of education and social justice and community involvement and community understanding, because it takes something to take the first step. Like when you don't know somebody, to put your hand out and say, hello, my name is so-and-so, or can I come and meet you? I think that first step, a lot of people have trouble with. And I want to commend your parents and obviously yourself, that they take that step. That taking that first step is the hardest part for most people, which is really what the world needs, is somebody to take those steps. And your steps that you've taken with youth work, and you said something about representation in arts and literature, and that was powerful. Representation in politics and the power structures, representation in education. You and I grew up in a time on TV. We didn't see brown guys. We saw Bonanza, Knight Rider, A-Team. We didn't necessarily see brown guys represented until The Simpsons, and Apu was the only
yeah, a lot of stereotypes, and it's getting better, but definitely need to see more diversity on our televisions, in our movies and books, like we said, but like complex, complex characters, because we're all complex people, and not one-dimensional stories and characters, right? Because then that's actually doing more harm than good, right? We don't want to proliferate the stereotypes. We want representation that is real, authentic, right? Genuine, yeah.
And we talk about South Asian, and you know how the term is a catch-all. And as we know, India, so diverse, the states, the cultures, the languages, the cuisines, and Pakistan and Bangladesh all used to be one country at one point, pre-partition. And so Punjab also is where my family's from, and the English being five rivers, and there's such a rich history that we as Sikhs, Hindus, Muslims have together, and that we're here now in Canada. And
Yeah.
just also to bring up the journey of my grandparents to in 1904 from Punjab to Aberdeen, Washington, and then meeting again people with brown skin at that time was not very common in those times. So anyone who was from the old country, it was people gravitated. Hey, you got brown skin. Hey, we're in the same kind of club. There's no barriers there. And so even one of my uncles in 1959 founded the first mosque in Western Canada, and the Sikh community helped build it because the Sikh community was in Kitsilano originally, and so because of their friendship and brotherhood, the first mosque got off the ground, and is still there today. And so this type of thing for over decades, and now we're here in the country of Canada, in the Canadian context, where there's so many countries that you mentioned earlier: the Chinese, the Japanese, the Koreans, the Black people, the First Nations. So as we are here, and we talk about injustice to one is injustice to all, and so our First Nations brothers and sisters, and really understanding them. Let's talk about First Nations reconciliation and how we ourselves can do our part as guests on this land to show solidarity and reconcile with our First Nations hosts.
Yeah. So important, right? Like we can never forget that. You know, we're all settlers here, and on unceded traditional territory, the First Nations people, and it's good to see that, again, even, and I'll use the term South Asian. That's such a again such a broad term, right? But if I look at even Sikh community and their Gurdwaras, they are starting to, they have already begun, doing the, acknowledging the land when we have our Nagar Kirtans and our auspicious days and gatherings at whether it's a Gurdwara or in the community. And so that's good to see, and that helps build that intercultural trust, right? It's I just want to go back to what you were saying about the South Asian community and the diversity within our own community. It's so true, and that's one of the things I try to get across to my class, that and I know, like I said, I teach Punjabi to them, but I like to talk about the history and the geography and how do we come to get here, and like how and when we talk about Punjab, and Punjab, well, did you know there's two Punjabs, right? There's Punjab on the Pakistan side, and there's Punjab on the Indian side, and there, how many millions of Punjabi speakers there are in Pakistan, right? Like and they're not all Sikh, right? There's Muslims speaking Punjabi Punjabi speaking Muslims and Punjabi speaking Hindus, and so because there's these are our identities, and but we can't just kids, they sometimes they don't know, right, until we expose them to the complexity of our own backgrounds, and how India is a multicultural place itself, right? And so it's important to really dig into that. Yeah, so diversity, diversity is important to explore, and also to look inward, that within that we can, when we talk about racism and discrimination and biases and prejudices, we need to look in the mirror too, right? Because especially again, when I talk to my class, I have I think two kids in the class who are not South Asian, right? Who are not brown. And so when I talk this, and when I talk to them about things like racism, well, they're really not going to experience too much of it in this setting, in this neighborhood, in this school. Um, but we, the danger is for them to develop, um, possibly racist attitudes towards other communities, right? Because of the, not being, not having the opportunity to maybe like to attend as multicultural a school as I had the opportunity to attend in Burnaby when I was growing up. And so I take it upon myself to bring, books that share experiences, of Asian Canadians or Black Canadians, and bring those into the class, right? We need, so that's important, right? So they at least get that exposure and that start to develop that understanding and empathy for people of different cultures, and make connections too, that we actually have a lot more in common, right? Than maybe they realize. And but also when we talk about our own, our own social circles and our families, so we got to examine the prejudices that we hold too, and sometimes it's just subtle things. It's the language we use, and maybe, being mindful and not letting things slide, that like, are we being anti-racist in our own lives, when we're not on social media, when we're not, out in public, right? And and just kind of calling it out in our own family. It's just hard to do. It's not an easy thing to do, but like, what, so I think it's important because it starts at home, right? And so we have to have those hard discussions, and by looking in the mirror and then being that example that we want others to follow.
Yeah, and I think we grew up in a time when casual racism and racist comments were common about other cultures and base and to hear it in a social context, and to hear a word that's derogatory to and then you start to think, whoa, hey, one thing is to not like it internally, but to now say, you know what, I, I don't appreciate that language, or I don't, that's not acceptable to say something like that. And I think that does take courage, and to stand up even when somebody says something that could be somebody that we know very well. And then just overall, most people I think are good, but when somebody makes a comment about another community, another race, another religion, and then you're just like, hey, wait a minute, if we're about caring for our communities, we have to care for others and give everyone their equal due of respect.
Yeah, for sure, 100%. Yeah, but it does take courage, but I think there's we're starting to see more of a climate of people, you know people have had enough, and they are calling out racism in workplaces and in the media, and which is good, and people are rallying together. So that's important. And sometimes it's not the overt racism, right? It's not the and we probably see less of that now. Like it's more the subtle racism. things like when people are asked to maybe, change their names because your name's too hard to pronounce,
Yeah.
or yeah, those types of things. And or it's important to have your name pronounced correctly. I talk to my students about that, and I want to know how to pronounce your name. If I'm not saying it correctly, tell me. And have that courage to tell your teachers, or and be proud of who you are. And so those little things. But in terms of the big picture, we you can call out racism, individual incidents here and there, but it's really going to take collective effort, and it's going to take some time to really dismantle systemic racism in our society, right? That kind of is ingrained in even our laws and our political institutions, and organizations, corporations, and just that culture of that has fueled bias, and really has its roots in a lot of cases in white supremacy, even white privilege, and just the othering of people, right? And so that's going to take some time, right? And it's got to, I guess, people who are in those institutions, creating change from within. It's going to take political will. Of course, activists raise their voices, but we're seeing changes already. I mean, even at the government level, I think the provincial government here in BC is recognizing that this is a priority, right? They've made anti-racism a priority. They've created a whole new portfolio. I know my friend Rachna Singh is now the parliamentary secretary for anti-racism initiatives. So that's a brand new position, and she's tasked with creating anti-racism legislation that they hope to pass as part of their mandate here. And that would apply to how government does business, how all public institutions, possibly educational institutions, and healthcare. So I'll come back to that work I was doing with the Such Community Hub, and we're doing what we can to help people not only in the South Asian community, but other people of color and other diverse communities access services that they're entitled to, but maybe because it's not being offered in a certain language, or they're being discriminated against even when they are seeking help. So that's it's important. We're doing that work, but it's if we look at it at a higher level, even it's been acknowledged that there has been discrimination in the healthcare system for a number of years. First Nations people, we were talking about First Nations community. So the racism that they faced in the healthcare when they've tried to access healthcare, right? So and the whole report came out called "In Plain Sight," right?
Real and Trupon.
Yeah, and kind of a really damning report, but with important recommendations moving forward. But it was the government that called for that to happen. The Minister of Health, Adrian Dix, and so they're acknowledging the problem. There's reports being written. There's recommendations coming out now. Of course, we all have to hold not only government's feet to the fire, but everyone's feet to the fire, that they act on those recommendations. So yeah, but that's that getting at systemic racism, and that has really seeped into every sector, right? So no one is immune to it. And it's I'm just it's good that it's being talked about. It's at the fore right now, and so we need to really seize this opportunity.
And how your work was such, and your work beyond in the community, that one thing, one of our identities is that we're Canadian, but to also that our ethnic, racial, or religious heritage is a deep part of our identity and doesn't have to be minimized. That to celebrate our Canadianness is to celebrate our racial, religious, and ethnic origin, and bring that to the table, that diverse perspective. And as you said, a lot of these systems and systemic racisms were designed by a certain race, white Anglo-Saxon Protestants that had a certain worldview, not necessarily keeping in mind your view, my view, other Canadians that love our country as much as anybody else, but our perspectives and our needs are similar and different, and to understand. And I think by this layered approach, with education, with culture, with political representation, and to meaningfully work with intercultural kind of work that we're doing even right now, that we're working to bridge the divide, so that that we're allies, and injustice to one is injustice to all. And I want to say that really this work with youth, and empowering youth, and giving a role model and example to youth is so important, because when we were growing up, we didn't necessarily, at least in the public sphere in Canada, there wasn't too many reference points, and kids need it. We need it, because now we're entering into an age which is a different age, which is this social media, internet age is polarizing and creating, there's so much disinformation, so much that's radicalizing people to hate one another, and disinformation designed to mobilize people to, even in the real world, start to assault people, harm people, or kill people. And we have to do our part in these forums, which again, thank you for coming onto this podcast, because we will disseminate it on multiple social media to reach a wider audience for those that share this type of work. But now there's this frontier that didn't exist when we were growing up, which is this online sphere. Maybe your recommendations and your thoughts, based on, because you are talking with the new generation, which is, this is normal for them. They grew up with this. We didn't grow up with this. This is their way of life. What have you learned from the students based on what they're seeing online, and possible solutions to combat hatred and racism online?
Well, it's like, yeah, it's well, of course, the new frontier, right? It's like there's almost no rules out there, right? It's scary for youth out there. There's so much that they're exposed to, right? You really, as parents, we have to really be vigilant in what our kids are accessing, because they're on all the social media, even at at my class, they're 10-year-olds, and they're not supposed to be on some of those social media sites, and it says they're supposed to be maybe 13 and over or whatever it is, but they're already on everything, right? And it's we're not going to go backwards there. It's giving them the tools to know how to stay safe online, not fall into these traps of getting hooked into that world, where it just breeds hate, right? Because right now they're blank slates. They're still so impressionable, and they take everything at face value that they see online. And so it's it's important to talk to them, all right, about how, again, internet safety, social media safety. We talk about that. I think what's important they need to know, when we talk about bullying, we talk about like cyberbullying, and it can be racist bullying, it can be homophobic bullying, it can be take all kinds of forms, but when it's out there, like online, once you put something out there, like it's never coming back. It's out there for good, right? And so we talk about the consequences of that. I remember having a discussion with my class about Donald Trump, when, as the most powerful man in the free world, getting banned from Twitter, everything, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. I think even maybe YouTube banned him. I don't, like, it was everything, right? And I go, if it can happen to him because of the hate that he was spewing and promoting, then who are you? You can be banned from all of that, and even worse, if this is there are real consequences in the real world. You could be charged, right, if you are promoting hatred, right? There is a limit to our free speech, right? You can't incite violence and hatred with their speech. There's a responsibility that comes with it, and whether it's you're charged criminally or not, there could be other consequences, like maybe you don't get that scholarship you're trying to get in high school because when someone who's on the scholarship committee, they Google your name, and maybe something that you've said comes up, or something, some pictures you posted, or some racist meme that you've created comes up, you don't, that could haunt you later on. So be mindful of that, and realize, it's nothing. It's not like when we were kids, we didn't have, first of all, we didn't have access to those things. They didn't exist. And, you say something to someone, okay, it's just, it's words. Well, now it's documented, it's out there, right? Someone takes a screenshot, and it can go viral very quickly. So I think they get that. I could actually use Donald Trump as a good example of something that, and that usually gets their attention. But yeah, and then, I always like to keep it in balance that social media can also be a positive tool, right? So, okay, using social media, that's great. Well, what can we do? What can we do positively with this tool, right? Can we make a difference? Can we work towards some cause, fundraising, whatever, and then I point to some real positive examples. Forget about the Donald Trumps. I point to some examples like Greta Thunberg, the environmentalist, or how Rihanna raised her voice in support of the farmers' protest, and just by a simple tweet, and it was a little thing, but I just use these examples of people that they can relate to, celebrities that they know, and how they're using their platform in a positive way, and so try to inspire them to do the same.
And they count. Every voice counts. You count, and I think this new world, we are also digital citizens. So we're citizens of our country, but our conduct online, we're digital citizens, and our code of conduct amongst each other and to each other in the written form, we have to conduct ourselves accordingly and call it out when we see it.
Right. Exactly. Would you say, relating to them at their level, like, if you wouldn't say that to someone in person, don't say it online, right? And treat, of course, we get back to golden rules, like treat others how you want to be treated, right? And so we bring it back to basics.
Yeah, and so again, I really wanted to thank you, Harman, for taking your time out to really share your story, your journey, and your great public service. And we looking forward to working with you and your book. We actually, Yusuf bought your book, so we have the book. I don't have it with me, but we have your book. And Gurpreet Goes to the Gurdwara, and you can pick it up on Amazon. And a great story of a Canadian story, and our
Thank
author.
you.
Harman Singh Pandher, and then also Such Foundation. And if you could just say the website again, Harman, that would
Definitely. Yep, you can look up Such at www.suchbc.ca. That's SACHBC.ca. And please look us up and contact us again if you or anyone you know is in need of help. We'll respond and we'll get them the help they need. And like you said, please, check out Gurpreet Goes to Gurdwara, available on Amazon, available even at your public library. And if it's not at your public library or in your child's class, ask for it. And because that's my real goal, get it in our school system, classrooms across the country, and libraries. I want it to be as accessible as possible. And it's the more kids that have access to it and read it, that's when we really start building understanding, right?
absolutely, absolutely. And thank you, Harman. Thank you again, and looking forward to working with you onward and forward to create a better Canada, create a better Lower Mainland. Thank you, Harman. And
Thank you, Tarek.